The house was quiet enough to hear the clock breathe. Each tick felt louder than the last, filling the hollow space between the walls and the life that used to exist within them. I sat by the window, watching the rain draw crooked lines down the glass, each droplet chasing the other toward the sill. It was strange how something so ordinary could mirror the chaos inside me, steady, inevitable, and slightly cold. My wife had left early that morning for another business trip. She didn't kiss me goodbye this time, and I didn't ask for one. The silence between us had grown polite, like two strangers sharing an elevator, each aware of the other's presence but unwilling to meet their eyes. We used to talk about everything. Now, we exchanged logistics. I had grown used to it, or at least I thought I had, until the message arrived. It came with no warning. "Hey, it's been forever. I'm in town for a few days. Would be good to catch up." The name at the top of the screen stirred something I hadn't felt in years, recognition wrapped in nostalgia. Sarah. We had grown up together, shared summers, secrets, and laughter that once filled spaces too small to contain it. Life had taken us in opposite directions, but some connections never dissolve completely, they linger, waiting for a moment of weakness to resurface. I hesitated before replying. The right thing would have been a polite refusal, another time, maybe. "Hope you're well, but that's not what I sent. It's been too long. Come by this evening if you're free." The message sat there, glowing, daring me to regret it. I convinced myself it was harmless, a simple reunion, a few hours of conversation, nothing more. Yet, beneath the calm surface, something restless stirred. It wasn't desire, not exactly. It was the craving to be seen again, to have someone look at me without measuring what I'd failed to become. Evening came quickly. The rain hadn't stopped, and the world outside seemed wrapped in a gray hush. I straightened the living room out of habit, then stopped halfway through. Why was I nervous? Why did I care about how the room looked? The questions hung there, accusingly. When the doorbell rang, the sound startled me. I took a breath before opening it. Sarah stood there, hair damp from the rain, a small smile on her face that carried the past within it. She hadn't changed much, older, perhaps, but still with that easy confidence that could make any room feel smaller around her. "Still forget to check the weather, huh?" I joked, stepping aside. "Some habits die hard," she said, laughing softly as she stepped in. Her voice had that same unhurried warmth, and for a moment, the years between us folded away. We talked about work, about how life had changed, about how much simpler things used to feel. The conversation flowed like it never stopped, filling the spaces silence had claimed for so long. As she spoke, I found myself studying her expressions, the way her eyes lit up when she laughed, the slight crease near her mouth when she hesitated. Every gesture seemed painfully familiar and yet newly charged. I caught myself remembering who I used to be when I was around her, lighter, unburdened, more human somehow. But as the evening deepened, the air shifted. There was a quiet weight between words, a sense of something unsaid pressing at the edges of our sentences. When our eyes met and neither of us looked away, I felt that weight settle into the room completely. For the briefest second, the distance between us, the years, the commitments, the lines we had drawn, seemed fragile enough to break with a single breath. I looked away first. She smiled faintly, as if she understood the thought I hadn't spoken. "It's late," she said softly. "Maybe I should head back before the rain gets worse." I nodded, grateful and disappointed all at once. "Sure, let me grab your coat." When the door closed behind her, the house felt even quieter than before. The rain had stopped, but the air still smelled of it, damp, heavy, uncertain. I stood there, staring at the space she had just occupied, realizing the silence wasn't empty anymore. It was full, of memories, of questions, of something that felt dangerously alive. And for the first time in a long while, I didn't know if I wanted it to fade. The night after Sarah left, I couldn't sleep. Every sound, the wind brushing against the windows, the hum of the refrigerator, felt too loud, as if the house itself wanted to remind me of what had almost happened. I turned on the bedside lamp, stared at the empty half of the bed, and wondered when it had become normal to sleep alone even when you weren't. I told myself that the evening had been innocent. 2 old friends, a few hours of conversation. But the way I replayed it, The laughter, the pauses, the look that lingered a second too long, made it feel like something more. A line had been drawn, and though I hadn't crossed it, I had stood dangerously close, toes pressed against the edge. The next day brought no distraction. Work blurred into background noise. I answered emails without reading them, attended meetings without listening. By evening, the ache of uncertainty had grown unbearable, an ache not for her, but for the person I used to be when she was around. When her message appeared again, I left my scarf at your place. Can I drop by? I didn't hesitate this time. Of course. I'll be here. I could have left it outside, could have told her I'd bring it to her. But I didn't. I wanted to see her again, to face whatever truth had begun forming in that quiet space between us. She arrived just as the sun began to set, a faint orange glow breaking through the fading rain. The light touched everything softly, as if the world itself was holding its breath. Sarah smiled when I opened the door. Sorry to bother you again, she said. You're not a bother, I replied too quickly. Her scarf was draped neatly over the back of the chair, as though I'd been waiting for an excuse to keep it there. She picked it up, fingers brushing the fabric as if testing whether to take it or leave it. The silence stretched, not awkward, just full. Do you ever miss it? She asked suddenly. Miss what? The way things used to be. Before everything became complicated. I didn't answer right away. The truth was too sharp to handle without bleeding. Every day, I said finally. But I guess that's what growing up means. Learning to live with the ghosts of better days. She looked at me, really looked, and something in her expression changed. There was sympathy there, and understanding, and something else she didn't name. She stepped closer, her voice soft but steady. You don't have to keep pretending you're okay. The words landed like a confession I hadn't made. My throat tightened. I could feel the pulse of a choice forming, a small, dangerous heartbeat between us. For a moment, the world shrank to that single room. The rain had started again, tapping faintly against the windows like distant applause. The light flickered as clouds passed overhead, and the air grew heavier, charged. I took a step back, more instinct than decision. Sarah, I began, but the rest of the sentence never came. She didn't move closer, didn't press the moment. She simply looked at me, eyes full of something that felt both kind and regretful. You're still the same, she said softly. Still afraid of what might happen if you let yourself feel anything real. I exhaled, half a laugh, half a sigh. And you're still the same. Always knowing what to say. The tension dissolved then, not broken, but transformed. She wrapped the scarf around her neck, her movements deliberate, almost ceremonial. You made the right choice, she said. I wanted to ask what she meant, but I already knew. The room felt different now, lighter somehow, as though a storm had passed through and left the air clear. At the door, she paused. Take care of yourself, she whispered. And don't lose what's left of you trying to fix what's already gone. When she left, I didn't follow. I stood there, the echo of her footsteps fading down the hall, the scent of rain and memory lingering in the air. My hands trembled, not from fear, but from release. The clock ticked again, steady, indifferent, as if reminding me that time moves forward no matter how tightly we cling to what's behind us. I walked back into the living room and turned off the lamp. The darkness felt honest. In that quiet, I realized something simple and terrible, that temptation isn't about the act itself. It's about what it reveals. And now, I could no longer pretend I didn't see it. Morning came slowly, dragging the weight of the night behind it. The sky was pale, uncertain, as though it hadn't yet decided what kind of day it wanted to be. I stared at the ceiling, tracing invisible lines through the cracks in the paint, feeling a kind of exhaustion that had nothing to do with sleep. There are moments in life that change nothing outwardly, yet shift everything inside you. Last night was one of them. Nothing had happened, and yet, something had. The silence afterward had shape, texture, gravity. It followed me into the kitchen, into the mirror, into every corner of the house. I made coffee, but the taste was bitterer than usual. Maybe I'd forgotten the sugar. Maybe I hadn't. The cup trembled slightly in my hand, and I told myself it was just the caffeine. But it wasn't. It was guilt, quiet, insistent, familiar in a way that made me realize I'd carried smaller versions of it for years. This one, though, was heavier. It wasn't about what I'd done, but what I'd almost done, what I wanted to do. When my wife called that afternoon, I hesitated before answering. Her voice was casual, practiced, the tone we used when pretending things were fine. "How's everything at home?" she asked. "Fine," I said. A pause. Quiet. "That's good. I'll be back Friday night." "Okay." The conversation ended there, neatly folded, like a letter never sent. For the rest of the day, I moved through routines on autopilot. Work, laundry, dishes. The motions were familiar, but I felt like an actor reading lines from a script I no longer believed in. Every ordinary task felt hollow, as though meaning had quietly slipped away while I wasn't looking. That evening, I found myself standing in the same room where Sarah and I had spoken. The air still held traces of her perfume, faint, almost imagined, but enough to summon the memory. I could still hear her voice. "You made the right choice." Had I? The question lingered, sharp and unwelcome. Right and wrong felt less like opposites and more like shades of the same fading color. I had stayed faithful in action, but not in thought. And somehow, that felt worse. Because the betrayal had taken place inside me, where no one else could see it, a secret wound that refused to heal. As the light dimmed, I noticed her scarf still hanging on the chair. She must have left it behind again, whether by accident or intention, I couldn't tell. I picked it up, felt the softness between my fingers, and then set it down as though it burned. I considered messaging her, returning it, saying something. But what would I say? "You forgot this, and you took something I can't name with you." Instead, I folded the scarf and placed it inside a drawer. Out of sight, but not out of mind. That night, the dreams came. Not of her, but of moments, fragments of laughter, unfinished words, doors closing quietly. I woke before dawn, drenched in that uneasy calm that follows regret. The world outside was still dark, but the horizon had started to lighten, the faint promise of morning creeping in. I sat by the window again, just as I had the night before she came. The rain had stopped, yet the streets glistened, reflecting the faint glow of the streetlights. Everything looked clean, washed, as if the world had forgiven itself overnight. I envied that. I thought about calling my wife, about saying something real for once. Not about Sarah, not directly, but about us. About the silence, the distance, the quiet decay we'd both learned to ignore. Maybe honesty wouldn't fix it, but it might make it honest. I didn't call. I told myself I'd wait for Friday. That seemed safer, easier. As the first hint of sunlight touched the window pane, I realized something simple and terrible: guilt doesn't fade with time. It only changes shape. What had been sharp and immediate the night before was now dull, constant, a low hum in the background of everything I did. I closed my eyes, took a slow breath, and whispered to the empty room. I made the right choice. The words sounded hollow, unconvincing. Outside, the city began to wake, but I stayed still, watching, listening, waiting for the sound of forgiveness that never came. Friday arrived with the weight of unfinished sentences. The house looked cleaner than usual, though I couldn't remember tidying it. Maybe guilt had a way of scrubbing things spotless, trying to disguise what lingered beneath. The scarf remained in the drawer, folded neatly, like a secret waiting for a confession that never came. My wife's flight landed just before sunset. I watched her taxi pull up from the window, the same way I'd watched the rain days before, silent, detached, uncertain. When she stepped out, suitcase in hand, I noticed how tired she looked. Not from travel, but from the slow erosion of something we used to call love. "Hey," she said when I opened the door. "Hey," I replied, forcing a smile that didn't quite fit. We exchanged polite gestures, a hug that was more formality than affection, a comment about the weather, the drive, the usual small talk we used to fill the silence. She placed her bag by the door and looked around. "The house feels different," she said. "Cleaner, maybe. Empty," she corrected softly. The word hit harder than I expected. Empty. She was right, it wasn't the room she was describing. It was us. That night, we ate dinner together for the first time in weeks. The conversation was mechanical at first: work updates, family news, trivial things. But underneath it, something fragile stirred, as if both of us were testing the edges of honesty. When the plates were cleared, she sat across from me, studying my face. "You've been quiet lately," she said. "I've had a lot on my mind. About us." The question caught me off guard. There was no accusation in her voice, just fatigue. The kind that comes when you've stopped expecting lies but still hope for truth. "Yes," I admitted. The silence that followed wasn't heavy, it was waiting. I could feel it urging me toward a decision, the same one I'd avoided all week. I thought of Sarah, of the scarf in the drawer, of the moment when choice had become reflection. "I almost made a mistake," I said finally. My voice shook more than I wanted it to. "Someone from my past came by. It didn't go where it could have, but it reminded me how far we've drifted. And how easy it is to get lost in that distance." She didn't speak for a long time. Her expression didn't harden, but her eyes changed, softening, then tightening again, as if balancing between hurt and understanding. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked. "Because I'm tired of pretending," I said. "Tired of calling silence peace." She exhaled, looking down at her hands. "Do you love her?" "No," I said quickly. "I think I love the version of myself that existed when she was around. Someone I stopped being a long time ago." Her eyes met mine again, and in them, I saw something unexpected, not forgiveness, but recognition. The understanding that comes from carrying your own regrets quietly for too long. "I'm not innocent either," she said softly. "I've thought about what it might be like, to start over. To feel something new. I just never said it out loud." The admission hung there like a fragile truth between us, two people realizing that betrayal isn't always an act. Sometimes it's a silence, a thought, a slow forgetting. Neither of us cried, neither reached for the other. But something subtle shifted in that moment, the faint sound of honesty cracking through the shell of pretense. Later, after she went to bed, I walked to the drawer and took out the scarf. I held it for a long while before walking outside. The night was cool, the sky cloudless. I placed the scarf on the porch railing, letting the breeze take it. It drifted, caught in the wind, and disappeared into the dark. It wasn't a grand gesture, but it felt like one. A quiet burial for a version of myself I no longer needed to carry. When I came back inside, I paused by the doorway, looking at her silhouette under the dim bedroom light. For the first time in years, the sight didn't fill me with guilt or longing, just a strange, clean sort of clarity. We were both broken, but perhaps not beyond repair. I turned off the lights and stood in the quiet. The clock ticked, steady and forgiving, as if time itself had given me another chance. Maybe redemption isn't something you earn. Maybe it's something you choose, again and again, in the small, silent moments when no one's watching. And for the first time in a long while, I chose to stay.